My name is Julia Foster, and I am 35 years old. I own a 12-person accounting firm that sits on the tidy side of successful, not celebrity scale, but the kind of business that pays the mortgage, the staff salaries, and the occasional indulgence. We do taxes, corporate cleanups, and stubbornly complicated estate reconciliations. I like order. I like the quiet certainty of numbers. I like the way a spreadsheet can't gaslight you. 2 years ago, Charles Jones walked into my life with apologies for being late and a laugh that made my chest stop. He was 27 then, younger, restless, magnetic in a way that flattened practical concerns. We moved fast. We were engaged 6 months ago. He used to work retail at a boutique that smelled of linen and eucalyptus. He hated it. He said the customers were rude and the manager was cruel. 16 months ago, he quit. Temporary, he called it. A sabbatical to find his passion, to figure things out. 8 months later, his passions appeared to be curated Instagram feeds, mani-pedis twice a week, and a manifesto about knowing one's worth that lived in inspirational captions. I don't tell you that to gloat. I tell you that to map scale, love and money intertwined, and how the imbalance hid in the small things, the way he left his laundry on the floor, the way rent notices slid quietly into my mail pile. I never believed money mattered more than character, until character was the thing that asked to be funded indefinitely. The crack made itself public the night I met his parents for dinner. We were at a neighborhood restaurant with low lights and a napkin routine that felt rehearsed. Charles was charming in that dangerous, comfortable way. His mother, Dorothy, had a soft, practiced nod for anything her son said. His father, Frank, made a joke about the job market being brisk. Charles laughed, glass tilted, and said, loud and proud like a pronouncement, "Why would I need a job? A real woman provides for her man." Dorothy inclined her head like a judge offering a verdict. The table burst into the small supportive noises that families use to seal a code. My fork hung suspended over a perfect piece of salmon. Sound stopped in my ears the way a film does when someone rewinds. Everything became extra bright. The fork's silver edge, the salt on my tongue, the way Charles's smile had no sightline to humility. It landed like a stone. I felt the room tilt, and then, more dangerous, I felt the years accumulate. Unpaid evenings, credit card statements. I'm going to figure it out, with no timeline attached. I tried to speak later that night, gentle, rational, and Charles turned the question into a moral lesson. My dad never made my mom work, he said, which might have been fine if Frank had actually not worked, but Frank owns dealerships, multiple income streams, a menagerie of cars that move money like quiet engines. The story wasn't about tradition. It was about an expectation that someone else would carry risk and the other would be preserved. It doesn't make you angrier to be patronized in front of strangers. It makes you quietly feral. I could have yelled. I could have broken a plate like some scene from a bad movie. Instead, I drank coffee, watched him sleep that night with the untroubled face of someone who thinks tomorrow will be financed by someone else, and I opened a new document on my laptop. The idea was not cruelty. It was arithmetic and theater combined. He had made a public statement about who a man should be. I decided to take that statement seriously. If a real man provides, then I would offer him an honest, legal, paid position, the offer he was implicitly describing, and see whether he accepted living by his own language. Paper does things. Paper imposes categories, times, and signatures. It reduces sentiment to items. It is the home of accountability. By 3 a.m, I had a folder with a crisp header, employment agreement, personal assistant to CEO. I wrote the things he never asked for but had implicitly promised: payroll, taxes withheld, clear hours, and duties. I set the wage at $15 an hour, a modest, entry-level figure. But I put the hours at 40 a week, and the start time at 6 a.m. I wanted it practical and unromantic. Breakfast duty, iron-edged shirts, home office management, errands on time, lunch delivered, a daily schedule that looked more like a job than a romantic compromise. I knew the math cold. $15 an hour, 40 hours, take home after taxes, roughly what he would earn if he actually did the work. He said should never be asked of a woman. I calculated the monthly amount and let the number sit beside my other numbers. The fact it was small enough to not ruin either of us was part of the point. The next Monday, I walked into the kitchen at 5:45 a.m. in a blouse I wore for court appearances and client meetings, brewed coffee while the house still dreamed, and waited for the performance. Charles strolled out 9 o'clock-ish, pajama soft and unembarrassed. He yawned, reached for his phone, and asked casually if I could transfer money. There was a sale, after all. "Actually," I said, and the word had the flat, careful tone of someone about to open a door. I placed the folio on the counter. "I found you a job." He blinked, that polite half-smile slipping. "What?" "You said a real man provides, I said, "so I found you a position. Work from home, flexible, and you'll be on payroll." I didn't puff it up. I handed him the contract and watched the color of his face change as he read. The contract read like a prophecy. Position: personal assistant to CEO. Salary: $15 an hour. Hours: 40 hours weekly. MF. Start time: 6:12 a.m. It listed the day down to the small things. Prepare a full breakfast for the employer at 6 o'clock. Iron clothes at 7 and 8 and 12. Clean and organize office, 9 o'clock. Answer personal emails and calls. 10 o'clock grocery run from provided list. Noon. Lunch delivery to office, and so on, until 6 p.m. End of shift. Charles laughed, a thin, nervous sound. "This is a joke, right?" "Not at all," I said. "You said a real man provides. I'm providing you with legitimate employment. Payroll, taxes, the works. You'll be earning your own money." He held the paper with 2 fingers like it was hot. "This is housework." "It's personal assistant work," I said. "It's common. It's legitimate. And you'll have your own income. 3 months of this. Steady. And we can reassess cohabitation. Until then, it's the job or alternative living arrangements. I can't subsidize indefinite entitlement." He stared at me as if I had rearranged gravity. I watched the way his composure unstitched, and the old scripts tried to resettle. The righteous injured party, the victim of unreasonable standards. "You can't do this," he said. "You're being abusive." "I'm offering a job," I said quietly. "You refuse it, and you have to explain to yourself why you think you deserve indefinite housing for nothing. My company can't run on feelings. My household can't either. There are quieter kinds of violence than shouting. There is the steady erosion of one person's agency by another's complacency. There is the belief that commitment is a synonym for sponsorship rather than partnership." I had loved him. I had invested in the arc of his potential. But love does not absolve you from the ordinary responsibilities of adult life. It doesn't buy you an open tab on someone else's labor. He said, "This is insanity." And then he said, "You can't be serious." "Dead serious," I said. "Your first shift starts in 57 minutes. Professional attire required." I left for the office with the folder clutched in my hand, because for all the small theater of it, I had a business to run and people who relied on me. The house kept breathing behind me, indifferent to the moral experiment it had just witnessed. By noon, my phone filled with texts. A dozen from Charles in various states of outrage and pleading, his mother calling, and a trio of messages from friends asking if they'd missed something. I didn't answer. I had clients to bill, ledgers to reconcile. Boundaries are boring in the moment and merciless in their consequences. The contract was a small, clear test. It had to do its work. When I returned that evening at 6:30, the couch looked as if it had never been used. No breakfast plates, no half-finished laundry, just the faint glow of Charles's last Instagram post and an open chat window. He stood then in the doorway between the kitchen and the living room, and for a second I read all the ways people perform when they expect to be sustained. "I'm not doing this," he said. "Then you're not employed," I said evenly. "No show equals termination. Please make arrangements to vacate within 30 days per the lease." The word termination landed like ice. He looked at me as if I had sworn at him. "You can't support me like this," he said. "I'm your fiancé." I thought of every hour I'd worked late, every client who'd trusted me with numbers when my hands shook. I thought of the way love had been converted to maintenance. "You can be my fiancé, or you can be my guest," I said. "You can't be both without contribution." He began to cry then, not with self-awareness, but with the practiced hurt of someone who expects sympathy to buy him time. The stage had shifted, pity as a continuing contract. 3 days later, he would try to prove me wrong by getting up at 6 and burning the eggs. But that is a story for part 2. The morning light slipped through the blinds like hesitant forgiveness. For the first time in months, Charles was awake before me. I could hear the noise before I saw it. The clatter of pans, the hum of determination. It sounded foreign, like someone trying to impersonate responsibility. When I walked into the kitchen, the scene looked almost hopeful. He stood there, hair uncombed, face still puffy from sleep, eggs sizzling in the pan. For a second, I almost believed it. "Morning," he said, with that too careful smile, as if testing whether the words could rebuild what he'd broken. I said nothing at first, just watched the smoke rise, curling above the stove like a silent warning. The eggs were already burning. "See? I'm trying," he said. "You said I wasn't doing enough. Well, here I am." "Charles," I said quietly, "trying and changing are not the same thing." He froze. The words hit like cold water. He turned off the stove, scraped the blackened eggs onto a plate, and set them down like an offering. "You think I'm useless, but I can fix this. I can fix us." I looked at the plate. The eggs were a metaphor he didn't mean to make. Overdone, overcompensated, beyond saving. "Charles," I said again, softer this time, "this isn't about breakfast." He stared at me, the hope draining from his eyes. "Then what is it about?" "Respect," I said, "and you only remember it when you're afraid of losing me." He didn't answer. The silence felt heavier than the smell of burnt oil. Outside, the garbage truck passed, the same sound that came every Monday. Routine, relentless, life moving forward. He looked at me as if waiting for a cue that wasn't coming. And I realized then, his effort wasn't for me. It was for the version of himself he wished I still believed in. That morning, I cleaned the kitchen alone. Not out of anger, but because I finally understood. You can't rebuild a home with someone who still thinks love is a performance. The following week blurred into a strange, polite rhythm. Charles started setting alarms, opening spreadsheets, even talking about job applications. Each gesture carefully arranged, like props on a stage. But the silence between us, that stayed real. Too real. Every evening, he'd look at me with that practiced optimism. "Had an interview today," he'd say, forcing a grin. I'd nod. "That's good." And we'd eat dinner in the kind of peace that only exists when both people are afraid to speak first. One night, I came home to find him sitting at the table, laptop open, surrounded by half-written cover letters. He looked up, eyes hopeful. "Julia, I think I'm getting better at this." I smiled, because what else could I do? He wanted praise, not partnership. Approval, not accountability. Later, when he went to shower, I saw the truth on the screen. Every document was the same. Copied templates, unchanged names. He hadn't sent a single one. The words blurred. I wasn't angry, just tired. Tired of carrying the weight of someone else's potential. That night, as he slept beside me, I stared at the ceiling, listening to the steady rhythm of his breathing. So calm, so untroubled. It hit me then. I'd built a life with a man who could only dream of effort, never sustain it. The next morning, I packed my things. Slowly, quietly. The kind of calm that only comes after a long storm. I left a note on the kitchen table, the same table where he'd once promised we'd figure it out together. It read, "You don't need to prove anything anymore, but I can't be the audience for this performance. I hope you find something real, even if it's without me." I closed the door behind me. No tears, no anger, just release. Outside, the sun was already rising. For the first time in a long while, it felt like morning meant something again. For 3 days, I didn't hear from him. Silence, the kind I used to beg for when we lived together, now felt strange, too wide, too final. Then, on the 4th morning, my phone buzzed. A message from Charles. "I found your note. I don't blame you. I just don't know what to do with the quiet." I stared at the words for a long time. They weren't manipulative. They weren't tender. Just hollow, like someone describing an empty room. 2 days later, another message came. "I applied for a job today. For real this time. No apology, no promises, just a statement. Detached and oddly proud." I typed out a reply. "I'm glad to hear that," then deleted it. Because I realized something. Closure doesn't come from the other person changing. It comes from no longer needing to check if they have. Weeks passed. I moved into a smaller apartment, the kind of place where every sound belonged to me. The fridge hum, the kettle whistle, the click of my own footsteps. One evening, I found a box I hadn't unpacked yet. Things from the old apartment. Inside, I found the burnt pan. The one from that morning with the eggs. I laughed quietly, a bitter, affectionate sound. That pan, scarred and useless, had survived every move. Maybe I'd kept it as proof that some burns don't fade, they just remind you to stay away from the fire. A week later, another text arrived. Got the job. It's not much, but it's something. I didn't reply, not because I didn't care, but because caring had finally stopped hurting. And for the first time since that day, I made breakfast. Perfectly golden eggs. Not for him, for me. Months passed before he reached out again. No messages, no calls, just a single envelope tucked beneath my apartment door. My name, Julia Foster, written in his neat, uncertain handwriting. Inside, a short letter. No greeting, no sign-off. I kept waking up early. I still burn the eggs sometimes. I think I understand now why you left. It wasn't the work, or the house, or even the waiting. It was that I never really saw you until you were gone. I got the job. I'm not great at it yet, but I show up. You were right. Trying and changing aren't the same. I'm still learning the difference. There was no mention of love, no plea for a second chance, just the faint scent of coffee on the paper, and something else, honesty, the kind that used to be missing between us. I folded the letter carefully and set it inside a drawer beside the lease for my new place. Both, in their own way, proof of ownership. That night, I stood by the kitchen window, watching the city lights blur against the glass. For the first time, I didn't feel the need to explain myself. To him, to anyone. Maybe some stories don't end with forgiveness or reunion. Maybe they end with understanding. Quiet, unannounced, but real. I looked at the pan again, still sitting on the counter, polished clean now. Some things stay as reminders, not regrets. And as I turned off the light, I whispered to the empty room, not a goodbye, not a wish, just a thank you. For teaching me that peace doesn't arrive when someone changes for you. It begins the moment you stop waiting for them to.